Okay, I've got a couple of quick little things to talk about before we jump into rules. Let's talk about the schedule a little bit. Don't get your hopes up. I don't have any information on the schedule. I just want to remind everybody that we would like nothing more than to release the schedule, to have already released the schedule, but we're not going to release the schedule for Oregon and Idaho until we get the permits approved. They were approved before now last year. So they're running slow, both of them. And I've been reminding them, but it takes as long as it takes. Washington is all approved. Washington's live on the website. It's up on the Washington page of Facebook. Somebody asked me about that today. Hey, when are we going to see the Washington schedule? I'm like, we announced that in November. So yeah, if you want to see Washington, and the native event is on there as well for the same date as the last tour event for Washington. That's all up on the website. What I can tell you, because I've had some weird questions too. People like, is March okay? I'm going to do a vacation in March. I'm like, yeah, we don't do events in March. So we're trying to do what we have done the last few years. There should be a season opener in April for all three. Then there should be a tour event in May, June, July, August, and September, and then the classic in October. I mean, same basic thing that we usually do. But I just don't know the exact dates and locations until those permits are approved. And when we released it before ahead of time, we had to change it. And then people were like, I already booked my travel. And I'm like, well, sorry. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to wait until it's approved. Let's see. Any questions about schedule besides what the schedule is? No. Okay, great. Membership. I've had some questions about that too. Just a reminder, if you're signing up for a membership, you still got time for the early bird, by the way. You can get in on, there's still one more early bird. There's two for December that I'll announce here in the next day or two. And then we'll have one more at the end of January that we'll announce. It'll get a free membership. So if you haven't signed up, go ahead. When you do, it's a little different this year. You'll sign up and then you will have a membership on the site. And that's where the discounts and everything will be in there. And you'll be able to then track your orders. So you'll know if you've already paid for membership. You'll be able to see if you've ordered any merchandise, see those orders. So it's a little slicker system. I think that's about it. Yeah, that's about it for the other stuff. All right, so let's jump into rules. The rules are up on the website. So if you want to kind of look through this while we're going through it, you can go to the website, Kayak Fishing Northwest, go to the resources and then rules standard. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the rules, there's a big section in red. And that's the stuff that is changed. It's either modified or it's a new rule or we've gotten rid of a rule. So we're going to kind of just go through that red section item by item and talk about each of these, any of the ones that need discussion. Pardon me, I'm still getting over COVID, so I get a little out of breath when I'm talking a lot. So I'll probably hand off to Chris when I can. Let me try and see if Jim ever made it in. I don't think he did. Okay. All right, so section 2.4, professional fishing guides may register and compete in events provided they do not guide for pay on eligible water. So we've removed that rule. That rule didn't really make sense to us. What the rule was saying is if you're a guide, you can't take a client out on that water within 30 days of an event. And I personally, I don't really see the advantage for a guide taking a client out on that water that the guide can't fish. I get why we don't want one of our anglers to hire a guide and go out a couple of weeks before an event and learn from the guide what's working on that body of water. But this rule was saying that the guide couldn't guide basically for 30 days before an event on that body of water. I don't want to take away their livelihood. And I don't really see how there's an advantage, because they could go out there and fish by themselves, 2 weeks before the event. Of course, they still have to stick to whatever off limits are in place. If there is an off limits and they have to be within, the practice period and all that's all pretty logical stuff that I think we all would get anyway. But yeah, I think that's a good change to get rid of that rule. Okay, so section 211, this is a big change. We've always basically done no refunds. And we're going to ease that up a little bit this year. We are going to allow you to cancel and get a refund up until the registration deadline. If you cancel before the registration deadline, then we'll let you cancel. We'll give you a refund minus a $5 processing fee, because we get dinged on Stripe or PayPal sometimes, depending on the way the thing goes down. We get dinged a little bit of money. So we're putting a $5 fee on it just for the pain of doing it and making sure we don't lose money on the deal. If you register late, we allow late registration in a limited capacity, and we charge it an extra $10 to do that processing fee. That will be non-refundable. If you sign up in the last week before an event, you can't cancel. It's too late. We've already let Fish and Game, we've already let the state troopers know. In Oregon, at least, we have to let the state troopers know. We kind of have to know about how many people are coming, so we really don't want people canceling late. And that's the section 212, this next one. If you sign up late, you're going to pay that $10 fee, and you're not going to be able to cancel at that point. One of the reasons we're doing this is by not allowing refunds and cancellations, it sort of was a disincentive for you guys to sign up early, right? Like, I don't want to sign up early in case something happens and I can't go. So it sort of encouraged you to sign up at the last minute, which we don't want. That really messes with us. It's difficult for us if everybody signs up late, because we need to have an idea of how many are coming. So this way you can sign up as early as you want. And, a couple weeks before the event, make sure you can still go. And if for some reason you can't go, then go ahead and cancel it at that time, and we'll give you a refund, minus $5. Okay. Section 2.15. We don't run into this very often in our tour events, but this is related to minors fishing. So the way that works is if they are 13 years of age or older, I think it used to be 12, we changed it to 13. If they're 13 or older, they must be accompanied by a parent or a guardian. They both need to fill out the liability waiver. And the other change we've put in place here is the parent or guardian needs to be in their own watercraft. Sorry, I'm still letting people in here. The parent or guardian needs to be in their own watercraft, and it's got to be a watercraft that we would allow in competition. The parent or guardian doesn't have to compete. They can just go out there and keep their kid company. But they need to be in a watercraft that would be allowed. It came up in the NRS event. There was somebody out there, there was a kid out there, and his dad was out there in a bass boat. And that just kind of rubbed us the wrong way. It wasn't in the rules, and the kid didn't drop that on us until the captain's meeting the night before the event. He's like, "Oh, my dad's going to be in a bass boat. Is that okay?" I'm like, it's not in the rules that it can't, so I had to let it go. But so we have put it in our rules now that we're not going to allow that. They need to be out there in a kayak or a canoe or, whatever watercraft that we're allowed to use, they can use. We used to also allow them to be out there in a tandem with the kid, and we decided we didn't like that either. That always bugged us a little, because if they were in a tandem, they were supposedly not allowed to help, like not even allowed to position the kayak while the kid's catching a fish or something. It's just too hard to not cheat doing that, to not break the rule. So we decided, no, people can use a tandem if they want, but you can only have one person in the tandem. So I think that's a good change. I think that clears things up a little bit. And so that's the next one, section 3.5. Tandem watercraft are allowed, but only one person is allowed in the watercraft. Section 4.1. So here's a change that you guys are all familiar with. Watercraft propulsion is restricted to paddle, pedal, pole, or single electric motor. Did you hear that, Brandon Hua? Single electric motor. Where's Brandon? He's got his camera off.
Marvin?
Yeah.
So before we go too far, I believe this is to the prior rule. Joe had a question about
Oh, I missed it.
fishing gear.
So does that mean that the adult also can't have any fishing gear? That's a good question, Joe. That's a great question. We've run into that. We have run into people, not a parent or guardian, but we've run into people bringing a brother or a friend or a kid or something with them when they're fishing a tour event and they're fishing with gear. And there really isn't anything we can do about that if they're bringing somebody like this. Could we do anything about it in this case? If a parent's out there, I don't like it. I think if they're going to bring fishing gear, we might ought to update that based on your question, Joe. And we might say the parent or guardian can compete. They can sign up to compete, and then absolutely they can fish. No problem at all. But if they're there in their capacity as a guardian, they can't fish. We'll have to talk about it, but that's my gut feeling right now to that question is we shouldn't allow it if we can. We may not really legally be able to stop them, but we'll have to talk about that and think about it. Excellent question though. That's something we didn't talk about, Chris, when we went over that.
We did not, but I tend to agree with you. If they're not a competing angler, I would lean towards no, they should not have fishing gear if they're chaperoning, if that's their skill.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Next up then is, so the two changes in that propulsion then, we've got single electric motor, of course, and we've got pole is added there. I don't think that was in there last year, but, and this has come up because of, because of the portaging thing really is where this comes up. And there was, some of you probably saw, there was one of the bigger bass boat guys in a tournament did that. He gunned his aluminum bass boat through a little slough and got into a little slough where it opened up, and then he got his pole. And he's like a Louisiana guy, so he's comfortable getting around in swamps with pole, and did really well. I think he won the tournament doing that. So yeah, you're allowed to do that. We're going to get into portaging a little bit later. But yeah, if you have a pole and you're in your kayak and you want to use that, if you're standing up and you want to use that to get around, no problem. You can totally do that. Okay, section 4.2. This is pretty similar to the motor rule that we had before as far as what motor you can use. We did make one little change to it. Electric motor used to propel a watercraft. Letter A, must be attached to the kayak in a safe manner for operation. And B, may not exceed 3 horsepower or 3 horsepower equivalent. Some of my friends would correct me on that because it's not truly horsepower, or 155 pound thrust. So the change that we made there is we took out a line that talks about the manufacturer's recommendation. And we took that out because it's a pain in the ass. The manufacturers are not keeping up with it. They're announcing for some big, giant, heavy kayaks, they haven't released information saying they'll allow up to a 3 horsepower, which the 3 horsepower is the Torqeedo 1103 is the 3 horsepower equivalent or very close to it. And the new Newport NK 300 Those are both around 3 horsepower. So with those motors, they're bigger, more powerful motors. That's why we're kind of relying on this must be attached to the kayak in a safe manner for operation. If somebody comes out there in a Lifetime Tamarack and puts a Torpedo 1103 on it, we're probably going to have something to say to them that we don't feel that that's a safe manner of operation. But if they come out there in a Titan or a New Canoe or a big rig, these big giant kayaks that don't necessarily, the manufacturing sticker doesn't necessarily say it can go up to 3 horsepower. I don't care. That's safe. That's fine. They're going to be fine in that. It's a judgment call. But use your common sense is basically what it comes down to. Certainly don't go over these sizes for motor, and don't put a motor on your kayak that is ill-fitted for your kayak. And if you have any questions about any of that when you're thinking about adding a motor, ask us what we think. Let's see.
You got a question in the text there, Mark.
About motors. Single motor. One motor on the kayak, no more than one motor on the kayak. To answer Greg's question, single motor is that one motor at a time. Yes, you can't have 5 motors and use one until it runs out and then switch and use that one until it runs out. One motor. We're not California, and we don't want to be California. I just had this same conversation with my native watercraft tournament directors, and Marv down in California is like, well, my guys all use 2 motors. They want to use 2 motors. We're like, no. One motor, that's enough. All right, section 5.2. This is a big change. This one might surprise a lot of people. Length, minimum length. So last year, our minimum length was 8 inches in most of our events, in our tour events and our online challenges. Most of the time it was 8, except for the season long and the no limit, for example. Those were a 12-inch minimum. And especially the 12-inch minimum, that's sort of what started this conversation. It's just too small, especially like in the season long. It's kind of crazy. We don't even judge fish that are less than like 15 inches usually in the season long, because we know they're going to get culled. And if eventually they don't get culled and they sit in there for a while, then yeah, we'll judge them, and that's fine. But it was always kind of a waste. People were uploading a bunch of fish that were never going to make any difference. And then we changed that to 14. So now it's 14 inches for the season long and for the no limit. Got to be a 14-inch minimum length. And in doing that, we started talking about the 8-inch minimum, which has come up before. We've talked about the 8-inch minimum and that we feel like it's too small. And, a lot of other people do 12, like KBF does a 12-inch minimum. And we've done some events, like we did the event at LePage last year with Wild West. And there were a bunch of people who fished that event that caught a ton of 11.5s. And me included. I was skunked on the day, and I had probably 8 fish that were between 10 and 12 inches. So I definitely would have had a limit if it had been 10. And they kind of expressed that they regretted they hadn't done 10 because of that, because there were so many fish that didn't make it. So we started talking about this 10. Could that work? And I went and researched a bunch of events and looked. And it actually surprised me how little of a difference it makes. One in particular that I went and looked at because I knew it was an event with a lot of smaller fish. The Oregon guys are going to remember Lake Billy Chinook we fished. That was a dink fest, super dink fest, tons of fish, but they were all tiny. And I looked, and you know what? Even for that event, it knocked out like 25% of the fish, 25% of the fish. And it didn't affect anybody like in the top 10. It only affected those people that were in the bottom half of the anglers, and it would knock out like one of their fish. And then maybe somebody all the way at the bottom had like 2 10s or 2 9.5s rather. And so it would knock out their only 2 fish of the day. So occasionally it will be devastating for somebody if they only have 1 or 2 fish that are under 10 inches, but I think it's a good change. I think it's going to be great. Brad, no limit is going to 14. Yes, no limit is going to 14. And the season longs are going to 14. I think that's it. Everything else will be 10. Am I missing anything? Like Fishathon, we did a little differently last year. It was what, 10 fish, Kagan? And I think it might have been 12. That might have been 12. So that might be 14 too. But that's an open. That's sort of a different event. And so for the season openers, we'll do 10 for that as well. But that's a 2 fish limit. Can we get 12 3/4? No, no, we can't. Okay. Section 6.4. Okay, so this is the staggered start that we did sometimes for shotgun, but with motors this year, we're going to go to a staggered start on everything. So there's going to be a 5-minute delay for pedal kayaks. So the paddle kayakers will start first. Then there's a 5-minute delay. Then the pedal kayaks can take off. And then another 5-minute delay. And then the motor kayaks can take off. And it's not just shotgun start this year. It's every event, every live event. Obviously, online challenges, doesn't matter. And the main reason we're doing this, 5 minutes is not enough to really make, oh, Jim finally made it. How about that? Here he comes. Welcome, Jim.
Marvin, you do have a question from Jim Carey, and it is a pertinent, good question.
No, because there's no good way to monitor that. If you've got a motor on your kayak, you've got to wait the 10 minutes. If you've got a pedal drive on your kayak, you've got to wait the 5 minutes. So what I was starting to say is these delays being only 5 minutes and 5 minutes, they're not really enough to make a significant difference in terms of getting to your spot. You're still going to get beat. If you're in a paddle kayak and somebody takes off 10 minutes after you in a motorized kayak and you're going a mile, 2 miles away, they're going to beat you, no question. But what this does, and the main reason we're doing it, is it cleans up the launch, especially on these places that have a limited number of launches, that have 1 launch or 2 launches, and everybody's launching there. It's a real problem if there's a pile coming out of the launch and a third of them are in paddle kayaks and a third of them are in pedal kayaks and a third of them are in motors. Just getting them all cleared out from the launch without, waking people and knocking people over and stuff. The 5-minute delay, we feel like really helps with that. If you're in a paddle kayak and you're fishing 100 yards, 200 yards from shore, you're going to be able to get to that spot. You're not going to get beat, and that's cool. But if you're going a mile, you're probably not going to get to that spot. Somebody's going to beat you. A pedal kayak's going to beat you. Brad's asking how it's monitored. There's a lot of rules that we can't monitor, but if you take off early and one of the other anglers is around you and they get a photograph of you taking off early, then we're going to DQ you. If we get proof of that, we're going to DQ you. There's a lot of rules that are honor system that we expect you to do. Launch time. If you're the only person at a launch and you take off before launch time, we don't know that unless somebody sees you and gets a picture. So we're asking everybody to just follow the rules. Okay, let's see. Before we get off of motors, I'm going to let Jim, and give me a chance to breathe here. Let Jim and Chris talk a little bit about motors in terms of registration and lights. Of course, we've got our 360 light right here, actually. We've got our 360 light that's required in flag. that everybody needs to have. But one of the questions that pops up is about running lights. And Jim's kind of already dove into this world, and Chris has talked to some of the people up in Idaho about it. So I'm going to let them take turns and talk about that a little bit.
Why don't you go ahead and start, Jim?
You need to unmute yourself, Jim.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can hear you great.
Okay, now I can't hear you. Okay, that's better. All right. So with the whole running lights thing on a kayak, you don't have to have running lights. You don't even, if you're looking at the Coast Guard rules, they don't even want you to have running lights, because the whole reason for running lights is to tell which way you're going or what you're doing. Lights on the bigger boats, even like your barges and stuff, they mean something to somebody that knows what they mean. You can tell what that vessel's doing. You can tell how long it is. You can tell whether it's pushing or towing. You can tell everything. But to people that are just, everyday guys like us, 95% of you guys don't know what those lights mean. The one light that's required for us is the all white 360-degree white light. That is required per the U.S. Coast Guard rules. Typically the Coast Guard doesn't want you having running lights on a small boat like this because they're confusing, and you're just running a trolling motor. You're not a motor vessel, an MV. That's what they call a motor vessel. You're not that. So the biggest thing with things, if you're concerned about stuff and you're just that worried about it, then go to your local sheriff's department and ask the Marine sheriff. And that's where I've asked 10 times upside down and inside out to different people. And I'm being told, because I don't meet the requirements, all of the requirements, I don't have to have numbers on my hull. So what I'm personally going to do, and I wouldn't recommend you do what I do, you do what you need to do and go check out or go ask, like I said, the sheriff's department in your area, because each state could be a little bit different. It just depends. But I've had 3 different sheriffs tell me that I don't have to have my boat licensed, my kayak hold ID numbers on them, because I don't meet all the requirements. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be me until somebody tells me I have to do something different. I asked the game warden and sheriff last year down at the mouth of Lewis River with one of my buddies that I was fishing with, and he has a bow mount on his PA. And I straight up asked him, hey, does he have to have numbers on that thing? And he said, no, you don't meet the requirements. So I'm going with that. You guys, I would recommend everybody, if you're worried about it, go check with your local sheriff's department. They will tell you everything you need. That's my recommendation.
We've talked about this. There's nothing stopping you from putting running lights on if you wanted to, but you just have to ask yourself if you think that that's the right thing to do, the safe thing to do, because you're telling other motorboats that you're a motorboat. And the truth is, you can't get out of the way like they can. You can't move on the water anywhere near as fast as they can. So
look at it this way. This is how I look at the laws. In the event of an accident, let's say somebody hits you and you've got your running lights on your kayak and you got all your stuff going on there, and it's totally obvious that the boat hit you. You are considered restricted in your ability to maneuver. That's what you are. You have the right of way because you're in a kayak. You have the right of way. But a boat hits you, and you're going to say, it's obvious he hit me. To the cop, it was obvious that he hit you. But then that boater goes and gets a lawyer, and you go to court. And then that lawyer looks up the maritime laws and the rules and finds out that, well, maybe you weren't supposed to have a red and a green light on your boat, or maybe you didn't have the all white light going, or maybe you didn't have something else. Guess whose now fault it is? It's yours.
Yeah.
So you got to think and look at things that way a little bit as well. Like I said, best advice we can give is go talk to your sheriff in your local area. They will be more than happy to tell you the rules and stuff and tell you if you meet the requirements of that. But I have been asking for over the last year and a half, and I can't find anything other than that all white 360-degree white light that tells me I don't have to have that, or I have to have that, but I don't have to have the other stuff. So
Greg Marshall, Oregon angler, said lights and hull numbers. He's been checked by the Yamhill sheriff and was told he was completely compliant. When you say lights, you're talking about running lights, Greg? Bow and stern. Yeah, so that's Oregon, and you're up in Washington, Jim. So
Yeah.
like Jim's saying, you really, and even if you're in the same state, like there's a big difference in talking to somebody in Hermiston and talking to somebody down in Medford. Like that's might as well be a different state. So you really want to talk to your local people. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris on that because that's what he did and had a whole different interesting interchange.
So I talked to a number of people in Idaho, including the Parks and Rec boat manager. Really nice person. Definitely caught her off guard. She fully admitted Idaho rules wording is out of date, especially as it applies to kayaks and the little SUPs and all the little crazy individual propulsion items that they make nowadays. She said we are supposed to have nav lights. We must have a 360 light, and we are supposed to register. She candidly admitted, as far as the nav lights go, each individual county sheriff, even maybe sheriffs within the same department, might apply it differently, and she'd be shocked if anybody was actually fined. But her interpretation of Idaho was, yes, you should have running lights. Yes, you must have hull numbers or registration. It's like $31, I think, through Parks and Rec. And that does take the place of the invasive species sticker for Idaho. So 30.
Yeah, and Brad's saying the same thing.
Trade off, they're both required.
Yeah.
I think it was Brad was in there, told by a local. Brad, are you talking Oregon local or Idaho local? Since
Good question. Good question, because he's in Oregon, but we'll see if he types an answer to that. But yeah, so you're starting to hear what the potential for this is. If you ask 5 different officials, you may get 3 different answers.
And it might matter if you cross over. If you're in Oregon fishing a Washington event, you might not need it. You might. I don't know. You're going to have to do some homework on that.
Sure. Brad said both. He said Oregon and Idaho. He's been told he's got to have hull numbers.
It's all up to which officer you get and what he interprets it. That's what I keep saying. It just depends on their interpretation.
So you have your flag and your 360 light that's required anyways, aside from all this.
So in terms of
go ahead and register, because that's what I've heard uniformly from everybody. Must have the hull numbers. I think it was 3 inches by 20 some odd inches.
Yeah.
Clearly to see at the water line, all the other verbiage, but
getting the hull numbers, in my opinion, is the smart thing to do. You're covering yourself that way. At least you've got the hull numbers. No one's going to say you didn't register the boat, whether you have to or not. There's some cost and some trouble on doing it. Most of you, if you're going to do that, a lot of them are going to ask for a title because they're used to dealing with boats, and there are no titles for kayaks. So you're going to need a certificate of origin, which you should have gotten with the kayak when you bought it new. If you bought it used, you probably didn't get it. I know Native Watercraft, if you ask them for a certificate of origin after the fact, like if you buy a used one, they will send you one. I can't speak for the other manufacturers, but I know Native does it. So it's worth talking to your manufacturer and see if you can get a certificate of origin from them. In terms of KFNW and our rules regarding this, that's not our job. We don't check your fishing licenses. We don't check your invasive species stickers, your waterway access permit. We're not going to check that your boat is registered. That's on you. You have to do it, and you have to make sure you're complying with the law. If it comes to our attention that you are not complying with the law, then yes, you can get disqualified from an event for that. We'll be as lax as we can about that, especially this first year. But yeah, if you get in trouble with the law, I mean, that's in our rules. That's always been in our rules. If you break any regulation, local, county, state, federal, any of those, you're in violation, then you get disqualified from an event. But we have to know that happened.
To follow up on Joe's comment, yes, Idaho is really easy. all you need to do is describe your kayak, and you need the 12-digit VIN number, identification number on the back right of your kayak. Hobies are on the very back right, kind of engraved in. Natives are on a little kind of placard on the back right, which are really easy to read. I'm pretty sure, feel like it's Feel Free is in the same place.
Most are easy to find the serial
Easy.
number.
Just punch it in. It's real easy through the website. Like
So
I said,
Idaho's not asking for a certificate of origin. They just want a serial number.
they want a serial number and describe the vessel, the kayak.
Is that the same with boats? Anybody know if that's the same with boats in Idaho?
It's the same application. It's the exact same. And it's
So
done-
they're not asking for a title. I think Washington and Oregon are asking for titles or certificate of origin. So
You can provide it and you can scan it, and it might make it easier. For kayaks, they don't care. They'll just generate it and send it to you. You get it immediately. Like for mine, you generate a whole number right away as part of your receipt.
Washington definitely wants a certificate of origin. You got to get it.
Yeah.
So,
I think Oregon does as well.
yeah, it's definitely required for Washington.
Okay. Any questions about motors, registration, any of that business? Raise your hand or unmute and blast it out. Well, I expected that one to take up some time, so that's good. We're ahead of time. All right, so let's jump down then to section 8.3, portaging. This one's become a very popular topic with all the National Trail Series. They weren't talking about it last year when we were, and now they're all up in arrears about portaging. So this hasn't been changed much for us. Portaging over land is not allowed unless otherwise specified on the tournament detail page or the Tourney X leaderboard page. Competitors must be able to navigate in and out of an area with paddle, pedal, motor, or pole while remaining inside the kayak. That's the key. You've got to stay in the kayak for it to be considered eligible water, unless otherwise directed by tournament officials. Getting out of the kayak to cross land or shallow areas is strictly prohibited and may result in disqualification from the event. So it's not exactly written here, but the only kind of exception to that is safety. Sort of the same as towing. Towing's against the rules, right? You can't tow somebody else to a spot. But if you're in a dangerous area, if we're fishing current and you're in an area where you may get pulled into a strainer or something, then yeah, if the only way out of the situation you're in is to get out of your kayak and move it out of there, do it. But you really should tell us that you've done that so we can make a determination if we feel like that warrants disqualification. And if it's that you went back in a creek and the water dropped and you couldn't get out without doing it, then we're going to disqualify you. That's going to be a DQ. If something happens and the current pushes you up on a sandbar and you're stuck and you just can't get off the sandbar, we're probably going to let that slide. So it's going to be a judgment call. But this came up in the native event last year up in Potholes because the water was dropping so fast. There was a launch that some of the people wanted to use, and you could launch and the water was deep enough to float out. But then there was a sandbar, and they couldn't get over that sandbar without getting out of the kayak to move it. And so we had this rule last year. It's been modified a little, but it's basically the same. You couldn't do that. If you can stay in the kayak and use a pole or use your paddles like a pole and get over it, Brad's saying, damn skinny people, he's right. If somebody's in an NRS star, those things draft about an inch. So yeah, no problem. You'll make it. So that's a disadvantage for the people that are in big, heavy kayaks, or if they're big and heavy, they're going to draft a lot more. So you might not make it in or out. This was the Drew Gregory rule, as a lot of the national trails are calling it now. They're all rewriting their rules because of one angler. Because he's going into areas they didn't really expect him to go that are an entirely different body of water. By the time he's gone 8 miles up into a river, he's no longer in the body of water they're supposed to be fishing technically, but it wasn't against the rules, so he got a pass on it. Okay, this is new. Section 11. Anglers must be able to submit their photos in the Tourney X Pro smartphone app. There's a typo in there. Submission via browser to tourneyx.com will be denied. Digital photographs of each fish submitted judges for scoring must meet the following criteria. So this is a new thing. We used to allow you to upload in the browser. There are very few people who do it anymore. I looked at the numbers on that today, and in 2022, there were about 6 or 7 anglers who did that at least once, at least a couple of times, that they used the browser to upload their submissions. And in 2021, about the same, probably about 6 or 8 anglers that did it in that year also. The main reason we're taking this away is because of metadata. The metadata does not get transferred properly if you're uploading in the browser. The catch time, the time that you take the photo, and the submission time end up being the same or a second apart. And the map GPS information is only accurate to wherever the person was when they uploaded the photo, not where they were when they took the photo. So that's why we're taking it away, is we got to be sure when you caught the fish and where you caught the fish. Most of the time for our tour events, it would, or online challenges, it wouldn't make a big difference, but the difference it could make is in a tiebreaker. If there's a tiebreaker, it's whoever catches the fish first, whoever takes their photo first, like a big bass tiebreaker, for example. And so if that's wrong, if that metadata is wrong, somebody uploading in the browser could miss out on winning big bass because the capture time isn't transferred. So we don't know. This was especially a big deal in the native watercraft events. In the Pennsylvania event, it's something we ran into with somebody. It didn't make any difference in the standings, but somebody was complaining about it, that their fish got denied or something, or didn't count where they expected them to because they were using the browser. In the past, I've told people if you're having trouble with the app, use the browser, but no more. Do not use the browser, whether you're fishing an online, whether you're fishing a tour event, don't do it. And we can check that. It tells us in there. And we get an email if you use the browser. So we'll know if you did it.
Marvin, I have a question regarding the photo. Is it still, you take the photo with your camera and then put it in Tourney X? That's still okay?
You can do it either way. There are some benefits to taking it directly in the app. That ensures that the GPS information is correct, even if your phone settings are wrong. So in one way it's better, but in another way it's worse, because if something goes wrong and you release the fish before that submission makes it in and a copy doesn't get saved to your camera roll, you're going to be screwed. So I don't generally do that. I take my photos on my camera and I upload them, but my settings are right and I know they're right. You know, we're going to talk about settings here in a minute too, but that's something Dwayne is instituting a new feature in Tourney X that's going to help with that. You're going to be able to see your GPS map on the submission page when you're uploading your fish. So you're going to know if it's right. Especially those people that are fishing an online challenge and then going home and uploading it later. You know, we see that. We see them upload it and we see their home address. We look at the GPS and it's like, it's your living room. You caught that in your living room. And we'll talk about that in here in a minute, but we're going to judge those much more harshly this year. We're going to be a little harder on people about it. Okay, and this is another one that this is more of a judging change than a rules change. Section 11.3, camera lens positioned directly over the center of the fish's body, which contributes to accurate measurement by judges. Photos taken at a low angle that obscures potential mouth opening may be denied or penalized at the tournament director's discretion. We are going to put the hammer down on this rule this year, and we're going to hit you hard with it early to try and teach everybody to stop doing it, because it's a real problem for judging for us. If you've got your catch board like this, and let's say this is your camera, you're shooting it like this, that's great. But what happens is, me, for example, I put my catch board like this at an angle in my boat. I put it down in the floor at the fence, and then this side's up over the gunnel. And so if I put my camera here and take a shot, well, now my angle is way behind the fish, shooting towards the gill plate. So you can't do that. If your board is angled, then you need to match that angle. You need to lean yourself over a little bit and take your photo so that you're always perpendicular to the catch board and the fish. And, you know, not way up here, not way back here, centered and perpendicular. The problem is if you're way back that way, or if you lean back, let's say your catch board's on your knees and you're leaning way back to get it in the photo, well, then you're taking a photo of its belly. And same thing, we can't see if the mouth is open. So what we're going to do to folks who are taking photos where we absolutely can't tell if the mouth is open or closed, we're going to ding you as if it's open. We're going to take that 1/2 inch off. And hopefully after a couple of 1/2 inch dings, people will learn and start getting their angle better. Generally, you guys are great. You take really good photos. Every time we've had outside judges, the native judges, the judge that we used for the Lake Wallula event last year said, fantastic pictures. You guys take really good, clean pictures. It's easy to judge. But that angle thing still pops up. We see it a lot. And so we're gonna get you on it. We're gonna sting you on that until you stop doing it.
Hey, what about the same thing goes for the guys that are holding their camera way, way up in the air to try to get everything? Remember we
Jack
talked
Eames,
about that.
Jack Eames is not here, is he? Jack Eames is notorious for that. Oh my God. Sometimes he doesn't do it, but then once in a while he's got his camera like up here, and like the fish, the photo's this big and the fish is like this big, this little tiny fish in the photo. You're killing yourself when you do that. You're really hurting yourself on resolution, because TourneyX downsamples the photo. Like on your iPhone, it's probably great, right? Because you got 4,000 pixels wide. But by the time it gets uploaded to TourneyX, it's not that big. And so when we zoom in on it, it gets fuzzy. The fish really looks fuzzy. And we can't even tell sometimes if the tail is, 15.5 or 15 3/4 or whatever. So yeah, don't do that. Who else was it? Rob Hammond here in Oregon was doing that. He had in his head that there was a rule that he had to get the whole catch board in the photo. And I kept telling him, you don't move in closer to the fish. He's like, but I've got to get the whole board in. I'm like, no, you don't. You just got to get the whole fish in. You definitely want the fence in the photo and you want the whole tail in the photo, but that's it. Get in as tight as you can reasonably. Don't get so close that you might clip a little of the tail or the nose off, because that'll screw you. But leave a little bit of fudge room around it, but don't put it way up over your head like that. I mean, it's okay. We usually can judge them and they're usually all right, but it could bite you. Okay, this is just a slight modification. 11.8B, no portion of hand, finger, or any object may be under the fish's operculum, gill flap or cover, or in the position where the closed gill flap would rest. Violation will result in denial of photo. So we always had the gill flap rule. That's not new. What's a little different about it, one thing is we're saying anything. So this comes up with people wearing sun gloves. We've had people with sun gloves where the finger's not on there, but the glove is. The glove's a little loose and it's under the gill flap. That's going to be a denial. And then the other thing we've run into is when you let's see if I can show you guys what I'm talking about here. if this is the side of the fish and here's the gill flap, if the gill flap is flared a lot like that, well then what's under the gill flap? If my finger's here, it's in the photo, it might not look like it's under the gill flap, but as soon as I lay that gill flap down, guess what? Boom, it's on my finger. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a judgment that if the gill flap were closed, your finger or whatever it is would be under the gill flap and you're going to get denied. The fact that the gill flap is flared shouldn't be a reason that the fish gets accepted. It shouldn't matter whether the gill flap is flared or whether it's flat. There is a little line along the fish's body there where the gill flap rests. You can kind of see a line where it rests. So if something has crossed that line, even if the gill flap's flared way up, we're going to ding you. Sorry. Okay. 1110B. Closed mouth is required for uniformity of measurement. If judge and or tournament director considers the mouth to be cracked or open, even if it is structurally unable to be too close, a half-inch penalty will be assessed. Repeated or extreme infractions may result in fish denial or angler disqualification. I'm not sure what's different in that. It's pretty much the same, but we are going to watch that really carefully. And some of the other national trails are doing things differently with it. KBF is doing some crazy business with theirs that I think is going to not work out well for them, but that's totally their call to make. So yeah, make sure the mouth is closed. This is one that's more in here as a reminder, and maybe that's what that last one was more as a reminder too. Section 12.8, KFNW reserves the right to make adjustments to judging up until the dispute period has ended, 24 hours after public announcement of the standings. So that means like the Facebook post. Once we go live with what the standings were, you've got 24 hours that you can dispute. And we have 24 hours to potentially change the judging up until that time. We ran into that with a couple of events last year. Usually it's not a big deal. We might have some little adjustments we find here or there, a quarter inch here, a quarter inch there, not a big deal. But we do reserve the right, even if it's a judging mistake, that can certainly happen. Or if it's a mistake that we didn't catch initially, which is still a judging mistake, I guess, technically, then we're going to fix it. If we catch it before the dispute period is over, we're going to fix it, and we'll make an announcement that we've changed standings because of that. I only know of like one event that it would have done that in the past, but it didn't get caught. This one's the same, section 18.8. This is more in there as a reminder. We had some guys fishing an online challenge last year that had like beer cans in their kayak. That is no bueno. No alcohol, no illegal drugs, nothing like that in the kayak. And if we catch it, you're going to get DQ'd. You're probably going to get suspended for an extended period of time. You might get banned for life. It depends on how severe the infraction is and what's going on. But alcohol in the kayak while you're participating in a tournament is absolutely against the rules and cannot ever be done. And same thing with legal drugs. Legal drugs is a little harder to spot in the kayak, like a can of beer, but don't do it. Just don't do it.
And Marvin, also remember we talked about bycatches during a tournament.
Oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because that's something I just talked to Washington about, and we had some people ask about it at the potholes event last year. If you're fishing one of our events and you're fishing for smallmouth and largemouth, obviously, and you catch a trout or you catch a walleye. Our rules from the governing bodies, from Fish and Game, in our regulations that they give us, you are not allowed to keep those bycatch fish. So if you catch a walleye and you want to bring it home, sorry, you can't do it. I mean, I guess if you want to pull out of the tournament and get off the water and take the walleye and go clean it right then, there's nothing I could really do about that. But
Don't have them in your online submission photos either.
that's right. So yeah, online challenges. Don't have a stringer of walleye or a stringer of perch hanging off the kayak. And we've seen that in the past. We have seen that a couple of times, but we are aware of it now, and we're going to be watching for that, and we're not going to allow it. So sorry, if you want to catch and keep, go out and do it when you're not fishing a tournament. So that brings up the rule that we talked about last year. If you're going out and doing something, if you're signed up for an online challenge and you're going out and doing something that's against the rules, not against the law necessarily, but against the rules, you need to let us know. So if you're going out to fish for walleye and you're also in an online challenge at the same time, you really should send us a message. You should send me or Chris or Jim a message and say, hey, I'm going out walleye fishing with minnows on jig heads. And we'll be like, okay, you can't submit any bass you catch doing that. And if we see walleye in the boat, we're gonna deny those bass. I don't think we'll DQ you. It would have to be pretty severe, but we'll certainly deny any bass you catch that day. So it's messy, you know. For tour events, it's not so messy. That's pretty simple. If you catch a bycatch, you got to release it immediately. Thank you, Jim. I forgot to add that to my list. Okay. So this is a change that this is a suggestion that that we change, and it's a big improvement, I think. This has to do with tiebreakers for AOI, for specifically online AOI. There was an issue with the way we were calculating the AOI tiebreaker because it was doing it based on all your catches. And one of the months was the no limit. So that really kind of skewed your catch. If one person did really well in the no limit, they were going to win the tiebreaker, basically. So we have now changed that. And the new rule is, this is 28.1. In the event of a tie, a standing score will be calculated for each competitor, totaling the final standing numbers for their 4 best tour event finishes of the season in the tour event series, or their 7 best online challenge and online challenge finishes of the season, online challenge series. The angler with the lowest score wins. So whatever standing you ended up in, first, second, third, fourth, we're going to track all those numbers. We're going to take your 4 best finishes and we're going to come up with a number that is a total of those finishes, and the person with the lower number wins of those 2. So if it's a tie and we total that up, that's how we're going to pick the winner. That means the person who fished best of those 2 people who outfished the other one in the most events is going to win. That seems simple and fair. And it's easier to calculate than the way we did it before too. So I like it for that reason as well. And then in the event of a tie there, if they have the same standing score total, then we're just going to go to biggest fish. Whichever has the biggest fish. If it's the same biggest fish, then we'll go whichever caught the bigger fish earlier date, earlier time. That's the person that's going to win. At that point, we're flipping a coin almost, because they did equally well. Somebody just got lucky and caught it earlier than the other person. I think that's a big improvement. 29.4, this is not changed. It hasn't changed much. We're kind of saying that's it. We're not going to do this anymore. military bases are off limits for online challenges. This really only comes into play up in Washington with Stu up there, but yeah, you can't fish a military base for an online challenge. Some of them do have quote unquote public access. You have to get a pass and get in. And that just doesn't feel quite right to us. We would rather it be truly public where you don't even need to get a pass to get in. So we didn't do it during COVID. We stopped doing it during COVID. And now we've kind of decided, even without COVID, we're just not going to allow it anymore. We liked not allowing it. Brad asked, what if the walleye have weights in them? You still can't keep them. They won't live, but okay. Any questions about any of these rules? Or any other rules that I forgot to bring up?
Only question I got while you were talking was regarding online schedule. Are you releasing that?
Yeah, I could. I have it. I just need to make sure there's no do a last check with all the directors and judges and make sure there's no changes that we want to make. We were discussing some potential changes, but yeah, if there's no changes, I can release it. It's pretty simple. It's not very different. I mean, you know, we shuffle the months around a little bit from what they were. The only difference really this year is for the most part, the 3 divisions have sort of the same theme in each month. There's a few exceptions to that, but mostly they kind of have the same theme for most of the months at least. Tourney X. So there was another Tourney X thing. Oh, that's good. I told you about him adding the feature where he's going to show the map. So that's going to be really helpful, especially for the newer anglers that haven't figured out how to get their phone settings right. You can actually test it then yourself without having to have one of us look at your submission after you submit it and see what the map says and where it is. You can just upload it. What you need to do is go somewhere else, go to work, for example, take a photo at work, come home, upload the photo, and before you even completely submit it, we'll have a test tournament. Tourney X, I think, already has one, but we'll probably get one just for us too. That's just a tournament you can test and send stuff to. But you'll be able to start to submit the photo and see the map and know whether or not it's showing home or work. If it's showing work, you're good. Everything's working. If it's showing home where you are at that moment, that's not good. If you see that message in Tourney X that says something about can't get the GPS data, it's using your current location, that's not good. You don't want to do that. Because if you caught the fish a mile away and now you're submitting it later in the day, that means the GPS is going to be wrong where it was caught, and the time usually I think is right. It does carry over the time usually, but the map will be wrong. So that's something he's doing. The other thing he's working on that I had suggested last year to him, especially after our Lake Wallula event, because we had some challenges with the check-in photo thing, is he's adding a check-in feature, a check-in photo feature to the check-in in Tourney X. So when you're on the check-in page and you're going to check in, you can take a photo right there. And it won't matter if the photo is taken before lines in, which was our issue last year. If you took the photo before lines in, it told you couldn't submit it because it won't allow a fish submission before lines in. So this won't have that problem. You'll be able to upload your selfie. We're going to ask that everybody use the check-in feature whenever they can. But because our service is really unpredictable, it's kind of hard for us to make it absolutely mandatory and penalize people for not checking in or checking out, because if somebody has Cricket wireless service and can't connect at a lot of the places we fish, I don't want to penalize that person because of the phone carrier they have. So yeah, try to use it. We want people to use it. It's a safety feature. It's like the light and the flag. It's not meant to get people penalized. It's meant to keep everybody safe. Speaking of that, that's another thing I want to bring up. Chad Hoover said something really, really good about that the other day. He told a story in their podcast talking about rules of an angler who sent him a video from his phone. Somebody got off the water to relieve themselves, took off their PFD and threw it on their seat, and then went to relieve themselves and came back. And as they were coming back, this person had their camera ready. They're just like beat it in on this person waiting, and they hit record. And the person gets in their kayak, doesn't immediately put their PFD on, and takes a couple of paddle strokes out. And then the guy turned the camera off and sent it to Chad Hoover and said, look, this guy was fishing without his PFD for 2 paddle strokes. And Chad said, okay, did you take the rest of the video? Because why don't you send me the rest of the video where you go over and tell him he needs to put his PFD on so that I don't DQ you for bad sportsman-like conduct. And that is our attitude about it. If you see somebody without a light or without a flag or without a PFD is a little different, but the light or flag, definitely tell them so that they will get it working. And if they don't tell us, and if we tell them and they don't, then yeah, they're going to get DQ'd if they refuse to do it. PFD is a little different. If something like that, where somebody is 5 feet from shore and just hasn't put their PFD on yet, but they do put it on right away, that's not a problem. There's no issue there. But it's on you to tell them if they're doing something like that wrong. That's a safety thing. I'm not telling you got to tell people if they're fishing the wrong place. You don't have to tell them that. But if they're doing something that's unsafe, tell them and tell us. But that's fine. As long as you tell them and tell us, then you're not doing anything wrong. But if you're being sneaky about it and just trying to get them in trouble, that's bad news. Don't do it. I think that's all I got. Anybody else? You guys all look like you're falling asleep. Idaho guys are already gone. They're watching.
You had one question from Patrick Kelly.
From Patrick. Oh, there it is. Will delay launch times be altered if there are no paddle kayakers?
Motors.
I don't think we can, Patrick. I mean, I understand where you're coming from on that, and you're right, but I don't think we could. I guess if it was a shotgun start, and there were absolutely no paddle kayakers, we could do that. But otherwise, I don't think we can, because we're not going to know. We're not going to know that nobody is in a paddle only kayak.